I must have been like 13 or 14, like I just, whatever. You wore like a white bra instead of a tan bra, like, right? Like we've all made that mistake
Yeah.
as younger people. But I remember that being really embarrassing. Hello and welcome to Film Curious. Today I'm joined by my best friend. Welcome, Nicole. How are you this afternoon?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about a movie that I don't think I would have seen if you hadn't brought it to my attention, because I did not know about it at all. So excited to be here.
Oh, well, thanks for coming on. Yeah, the film we're going to be covering today is The Starling Girl, and that is directed and written by Laurel Parmet, stars Eliza Scanlan, Pullman, and Jimmy Simpson. And a brief overview of what this film is about is a 17-year-old Jem Starling struggles with her place within her Christian fundamentalist community, but everything changes when her magnetic youth pastor, Owen, returns to their church. This was a film that, I just compile lists of movies that I need to watch. And this was one that I had, and well, it's not really my fault. I'll say that because we have this problem where most of the time you're not getting indie movies at a theater near you, right? So The Starling Girl had come out in 2023. It did have a lot of acclaim at the festivals, the film festivals. It was doing really well. But it was just nothing that I was able to see anywhere near me. So It was on one of my lists of like a must see, had really great reviews on it. And then I don't think it came to streaming until just a little while ago. I caught it on Netflix and I was like, oh, it struck me right away that I was like, oh, this was something that I wanted to see. Now it's finally on Netflix. So that is a way for everybody to go see it. And I did want to make this episode because I was like, yeah, I want everybody to know how good this film is. And yes, it's 3 years later at this point, but I think that I would love this filmmaker. Not that my tiny podcast can do much, but I would love this filmmaker to get recognition for this movie. I think it is so stellar in terms of storytelling and even the cinematography, the shot choices. We'll get into it. But yeah, I think I just really wanted to showcase this film because I watched it and it really blew me away. And I think what I'll say about it to get us into the conversation is I really appreciated her way of storytelling, that she's not going to give you a point of view that you should have. Like, she has an unbiased way of telling this story. Like, yes, we are getting the point of view of Jem, like in her situation, right? But I don't feel like the way she tells this story with the camera, with the characters, really takes a side, of like what's right and wrong here. And so I really appreciated that. I think it had a really nuanced way of telling it. And of course, like with this sort of story and Christian fundamentalism, you could right away be turned off, by the religious aspect of it, the community. But I don't think she was trying to tell us whether the fundamentalism was. You could tell it's wrong at times, right? When like Jem is being treated much older than she is, or than like a child. But I think she wasn't taking. I appreciate how the writer just wasn't taking a side here. She's just, this is the way that this community runs, and kind of take it from there. So yeah, that's I think what I'll say to dive in. Nicole, do you have any like first thoughts about the film? Or
Yeah, I mean, similar to what you were just saying, I think that did really strike me that Jem's character too is allowed that room to just be what she is, which is like a 17-year-old girl in maybe a situation that's a little bit more intense in terms of like scrutiny and the way that she views her desires and what she's able to do. But I really, really liked her transformation, I guess. Not her transformation, but it was very nuanced and subtle. And from scene to scene too. And Eliza Scanlan is like amazing. I think we both love her. But that she just her face, that you're able to see, like, so the emotions of, like, just pure rage sometimes simmering underneath of her face, and then just devastation. Like, there were so many moments where she really made me cry, and she makes you feel like, because she has talked about too how she thinks it's funny she keeps getting cast as, like, a teenager. I think she's 27 or 28 at this point, but she looks so, like, in the
She
yeah.
does still look, yeah, I mean, if she was 28 now and she was only 25 then in this film,
Yeah,
but yeah, she looks like she, yeah, I mean, it
she
makes sense
does,
that
but
they would still cast her
yeah.
as this.
But she, just like in anything that I've seen her in and in this movie, to get that vulnerability, but then also to get that kind of that power. And that's, I think that comes across really nicely too, is the way that she is exploring that at that age and figuring out the power that she has with her sexuality. But it is a very specific community. So because she is in a Christian fundamentalist community too, it's not like with a regular teenage girl either, where you can maybe figure it out. You can sort of experiment.
Right.
There's like this other layer to it that was this like constantly giving me this kind of anxiety when I was watching it too, of how people were going to perceive her when they found out about things she was doing.
Mhm. I think now we gave a nice little overview. I think I would want to get into spoilers of this now. So if you haven't seen The Starling Girl, hop onto Netflix. Go watch this. This is definitely worth your time because I just really want to get into a deep dive about it. So full warning, spoilers now. So yeah, Eliza Scanlan's performance I think is incredibly standout, as you were saying. And I think, though, that the way that the storytelling works with the camera on certain visual choices and framing adds to that performance, right? So I notice with the camera, we're never too far away from Jem. You know, there's not a ton of wide shots in this film from my memory, and I watched it a second time just so it was kind of fresh. We are kind of very close with her most of the time. And I think that lends to Scanlan's performance because we get, yeah, a lot of, what you were saying, those micro expressions almost. And, we feel her embarrassment. We're with
Yeah.
her when she feels humiliated. And again, it's just a great performance, but also the way that the story moves, you kind of immediately get a grasp of like what this church is. I think like that's another thing is like, it's a very established very quickly with very few scenes. So I think that's like a really deft way of storytelling too, right? That you can be like, this runtime I think is like an hour and 45 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And, or maybe it is like it felt 2 hours. But she doesn't waste, the director, Laurel Parmet, does not waste any time. She puts you right into that church. Already we know somebody's apologizing because of what he did, what kind of transgression this young teenage boy must have had. And they sent him away to their correctional kind of summer camp or just camp to get him fixed. And he has to do this humiliating thing of having to apologize to like for his, I'm putting this in quotes, transgressions, because we don't know what he did. And I'm assuming that it's probably not that bad for our outsider point of view.
Yeah, I think
do they say what he
at
did?
one point, like the boys, they're talking about it, and I think they say that he was looking at porn, like on his parents' computer or something.
Okay, I missed that detail.
Yeah, which again maybe is not exactly what happened, but yeah, that would be a good example of what you're saying of like you probably don't need to be sent somewhere, and we know too he's got a scar on his hand, that some kind of physical punishment took place.
Mm. So very quickly we get that scene, then we get Jem, and you know what? I felt for her in this scene because I did not grow up in a fundamentalist Christian or even really strict Christian household, but growing up, my pastor at my Lutheran church, his wife was the leader of the dance troupe, and she held like dance classes and lessons, and they would perform up on the stage, like of our church like that. So like, yeah, I was having kind of like flashbacks to those days, right? And so I knew immediately, like, the feeling that Jem was having, of the kind of, like, you have to be so self-aware of what you're wearing, who you're being, a politeness. Like, no, I didn't have to worry about, like, really what I was wearing. But the moment, so this hit me hard because the moment that a mother pulls them aside, Jem and her mother get pulled aside by another mother in the church to let Jem know that you can see her bra through her dance outfit. And you can feel Scanlan's humiliation there. I've had that moment happen to me in real life where, like, another mother had, like, kind of pointed out to my mother that you could see my bra through my shirt when I was young, you know? I must have been like 13 or 14, you know, like I just, whatever. You wore like a white bra instead of a tan bra, you know, like, right? Like we've all made that mistake
Yeah.
as younger people. But I remember that being really embarrassing, you know? And so I could really like relate to this whole setup of the film, right? And I love that's all within like the first 5 minutes. And then she meets Owen, right? And he's smoking a cigarette and she's crying and he's
Yeah.
automatically like somebody different, somebody outside, who maybe doesn't feel the same way as his community, right? So I think the setup of the film is just actually pretty brilliant now that I think of it. And it gets right into it and it tells you everything you need to know all within, 10 minutes.
Yeah, it establishes it very quickly in that moment specifically too, the first time that we see him in the background. He's smoking and he's like, "Oh, like don't tell anybody." And she's crying and obviously she doesn't want anyone to know about that either. So like it is very clever because it does also immediately establish them both as being people that maybe outside of the norm of what they're supposed to be doing. And having that moment of vulnerability, and then it does really nicely set that up for the rest of the movie so that it's like the two of them have some kind of connection. But until you were like laying it out like that, I didn't think about it. But you're like, there's so much done so quickly, especially like if you have no like understanding of this type of community, that it establishes something like that, like with the broad detail, where maybe some people will be watching and be like, what the hell? You know, like you understood that experience, but some people, especially I think if you're not women in general, maybe not growing up and having that experience of like attention being called to your body for literally no reason other than the fact that it can be seen was quite interesting. And Laurel Parmet, I guess, yeah, that's her name.
Mhm.
But I was reading that she did research. She went to some Christian fundamentalist communities in Oklahoma. And she was saying that it was really sad to her that the women, it was really clear that like they were taught to view their desires as sinful. And at first she was
Mm.
like, wow, this is really backwards. And like, I'm glad that I didn't grow up like this. But then the more she thought about it, she was like, then I realized how much I did relate to them actually, because she's like,
Mm.
I did have experiences where society taught me how to think about my body or brought attention to my body in a certain kind of way. It wasn't exactly the same, but that she was like, oh, actually, I can connect with this.
Yeah, I mean, surprisingly, and I guess you see that too, right? Uh, I mean, I've had not like some like youth Christian stuff that like is reminiscent, but nowhere near it. But like, yeah, I think she did a good job of being like, we might think of this type of community as totally out there, but like, here are the connections to coming of age. Like, I think this is a really good coming of age story too, because I think a lot of it is Jem's figuring out like what she has control over, and making decisions for herself, which is very hard in her community. So there's that aspect that I really appreciated. I really appreciated little details of, you know, things being sinful, right? So like every time I noticed every time that Jem was kind of either had just been thinking about Owen or had an interaction with Owen or experience, but then, the next scene or two, she wasn't with him or something. She was eating junk food. She was just
Oh,
like a
yeah.
constant, like it was almost like the junk food was like a replacement for sex thoughts and her bad thoughts, but she needed like some kind of like, stimulation still.
Yeah.
And so Yeah, I found that really interesting that she would be eating some kind of junk food if it was like Cheetos or donuts or really anything, and you could tell that she would heavily rely upon like something to eat if if she didn't have if she had a sinful, again in quotes, sinful thought or lustful thought. And so I thought that was a really great little detail too. Another thing that I think is just brilliant is uh, the idea of Jem goes into, I guess it's like a lake or a preserve, some kind of bayou type
Some kind of body of
area,
water. Yeah.
some kind of body of water. I mean, they're in Kentucky. They say they're in Kentucky. So, like, I'm trying to think of, like, what body of water is in Kentucky that they could be in. But I like that we'll talk about, I'll touch on this briefly. And then I do want to talk about the sex scene or the first sex scene, because there's something really unnerving about it, and I think it was handled really well. But immediately when she feels like dirty, she goes to this body of water, this lake, preserve, whatever it is, to like cleanse herself. Like it's almost like she needs like the holy, again, holy water, and putting in quotes sort of things of like the baptism, right, to like free her of her sins. And she does that twice, and it's kind of, and we get the two very different moments of when she does it after Owen has sex with her, and then she does it again with the younger brother. Is the younger brother's name Billy?
I think it's Ben.
What's his name? Ben. I'm like,
Ben.
that's one that would make more sense. Ben makes more sense. And yeah, he plays Ben Taylor, Austin Abrams. I recognize him from a couple of things, actually. This is such a tangent. Oh, he was just in Weapons.
Yeah. He's
That's
great at
why.
Weapons. Yeah.
Yeah, he has the druggie in Weapons.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, so then the younger brother in the courting. So if you're listening to this and you did not watch the Starling Girl, just so you have and you are fine with spoilers, this is just so you have an idea of what the hell is going on in the movie. Ben, the younger brother of Owen, both the pastor's sons, is courting Eliza Scanlan's character, Jem. It's not really by her choice. It's kind of like a forced upon her thing. And like courting, I guess, is like dating, but not really. It seems almost like a given that these two will wed after their quoting. Again,
Yeah.
I keep saying courting. I keep putting things in quotes if you're just listening and not watching, because I think that courting is such a weird thing. But it seems like like, I mean, it's a good thing, like but it's such a weird old timey like thing that like we know courtship is meant for wedding somebody. But anyway, she has this one scene where Owen follows her into the water immediately after he has sex with her. I'm saying he has sex with her because I don't really think it's consensual, and that's why like we can get into that aspect of it. Right, Owen follows her into the water afterwards, and she doesn't want to be touched. She's like, kind of leave me alone. But then she kind of gives in to him and goes, okay, I do want this, kind of, I guess, is the decision she comes to. Right. And then she does it again later on in the film after they're not found out yet, but they're close to it. Right. Like Owen's like, we got to stop this because, it's getting too close for comfort now. I think people are going to your little sister knows, like, this is not good. So he's ignoring her. She kind of has a mental break, which who wouldn't after all the things that happen, the sequence of events happen.
So many
where like dad's in a coma for taking too many pills and his drinking problem. And Owen's now, breaking up with her, and she's forced to bring her younger siblings to this church gathering when her father is, we don't know, she doesn't know if her father is going to be waking up or not, and like this responsibility to act like it's all okay and go be a part of the community. And that's like the second time that she runs into the water after Owen is dismissing her, and Ben, the younger brother, follows her in and tries to be like, it's okay, are you okay? And this is like the change in the scene where he thinks it's playful at first, right? And then it's very clear that Jem is like, no, I'm not fucking playing around, and like basically ducks his head under the water to almost drown him, right?
Yeah.
And I just really liked that the early scene in the film of with Owen, and then the later scene with Ben, and you could see like the change in like, no, I'm not going to say yes to things that I'm not comfortable with anymore, or I'm not okay with this, right? So I really liked that kind of cyclical. It's not cyclical. I think that's not the right word I'm looking for. It's the change from. It's using the same scene in different ways, and I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. I like in that scene too how it's all those things are happening. She tries to talk to Owen and he's like, get it. And she says something too about like like she's trying to tell him too about like my dad might be dead, like it's something she's reaching to him for comfort. And he like physically was like, get away from me, and then the dance troupe comes in because that also her dad right beforehand, he knew that she had lied when she goes and she's with Owen and she has to hide at his house in the bathtub, which is another terrible
Euphoria-esque type
very
moment.
yeah, I was very much thinking of Cassie, the hands over the mouth too. But her dad's like, no, forget about dance troupe. So then she's there and then the dance troupe comes out and she's watching them and that's when she gets this look on her face and she marches off and runs into the water. And she does keep saying like, no, I want to be alone. I want to be alone. I want to be alone. I think too, I took that scene because when the first one happens with Owen as well, like when she runs off, it's like after he's had sex with her and then she's kind of trying to climb on top of him and be like a little bit more, like maybe more of like the aggressor trying to initiate something after. And he is like, oh, okay, like calm down, like hold on, and then she gets this look on her face again and then she kind of storms out of the car. So that I think it's also partially, it's like she's feeling these intense emotions and nobody's letting her feel them. Like even in that moment too. And I think there's a lot of moments like that throughout the story. I appreciate how she treats the Owen character, how we're supposed to receive him. And that is one of those moments where I think it shows that where he's supposed to be different from everybody. And she thinks like, oh, okay, this is something just for me. And there's just someone who understands me. But that in many ways, he is like everybody still in the community where she can't fully be herself or, like, it's like, okay, like calm down, like just in that moment where she's getting a little bit like wants to like, she's excited to be with him.
Assert herself, control something, have some controls, have like a decision made in this process. Yeah.
Where she's actually a part of it and she's not just going along with him leading her. And he's like, like just calm down, or like this is kind of like, okay, that's too much. Like, let's just like sit here now. And then with the dance troupe too, like when she sees them and everything's happening, I feel like she's got all these emotions of like where she's just like, I'm so sad and I'm so angry and I'm so scared. And everybody, I'm supposed to just act like none of this is actually happening. And then Ben is going to come chase after me. Ben, who I guess I'm supposed to marry, but I can't even talk to. I can't even have a conversation.
Yeah, there's no connection there. And then it does show too, like even though they are the same age, there's a huge maturity difference between Jem and Ben,
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that I'll touch on this since we already touched on this. I think that the filmmaker did a really good job of handling the sex scene. And I think it makes it like, if you had to like teach somebody like what consent is, I would kind of show them this scene where like Jem says nothing. The whole interaction happens, right? They start kissing. You can tell that she kind of doesn't really know what's going on. I would assume like she doesn't even know what's going on even more because of the Christian fundamentalist background.
Yeah.
She doesn't say anything even, when he, I guess he takes off her underwear and penetrates, and you can just tell that she's like, oh no, I don't like this. You could tell that her face is like, this is painful. And I think that it's like a really good example of like, this isn't consent, you know,
Yeah.
especially him being the older man and her being 17. I think that right there kind of shows, you know, I don't know, maybe somebody else could watch this with like less emotional intelligence or something, or less empathy and be like, well, she didn't say no. But I think that this scene was a really good example of like the difference between consent and there was no like verbal, like, yes, please do this.
Yeah. I think too, I was like writing notes as I was watching, and I wrote something down that was just like, "No, I don't like this. No, he's bad." Like, it was just because I was watching it not sure about, like, how this character is gonna be portrayed, and I feel like seen enough things by now, read some stuff. I just read a book, by Jeanette McCurdy
Mm.
that it's called Half His Age, and it focuses, on a 17-year-old and with her teacher, and, like, there's a lot in that book too about, like, the power that she has or how she, like, goes after a relationship with him. But I appreciated about that book, and I think the same thing happened in here too, where it's not like, "Oh, okay, this is completely bad. You're completely good." But when I was watching this movie up until that point, like when Owen kissed her, they're clearly getting closer together, and you know that that's not right.
Mm.
I wasn't feeling like, like, oh, okay, he's a predator or, anything like
Yeah,
that.
no,
Yeah.
you don't feel that way about Owen, and I think, yeah, she does, like, a good job about, like, no, like, he's not an awful person, and no, you know, he is, I guess, predatory in that scene, but there
Yeah.
are a lot of scenes where he's not, and there's a lot of scene like, yeah, I think she just handles, like, the nuances of being a person well, um
Yeah.
and, like, I don't think Owen is terrible. I think he is stunted,
Yeah. Yeah.
maturity-wise. I think we find out that, like, being forced into an early marriage when you don't know who you are and how to behave is not helpful in your, like, maturation process, you know? Like, that's not a helpful thing,
Yeah.
um, to being like, helping you process eventually being an adult, 'cause then, there are times where Owen just, like, totally skirts responsibility all the time, right? Like, so he clearly, like, he's a bit stunted. So yeah, I think that, she does a good job of being like, "No, he's not terrible," but at the same time, he doesn't know how to take responsibility, and he is a full-grown man who no one's taught to take responsibility for his
Yeah.
actions.
Or then I think then she also does a really good job of putting you in Jem's perspective, because in that scene where he has sex with her, like, I think that moment where I was like, no, like, I don't like this. I was kind of surprised, I think, along with her, because I
Mm,
was surprised by how it kept going and how nothing was being said. I didn't think that he was just going to be that aggressive, and I don't know. I was expecting, I think, probably maybe what she was expecting in her mind. Like when she's thinking about, and
mhm.
like you said too, like she doesn't really probably know that much actually just about sex. But that she maybe had a vision in her mind of what it would be like, and then it's really just going very fast. He's not checking in with her in a car in the dark, and it's probably not at all what she would be able to verbalize that she wanted, or what she envisioned where this whole relationship was leading. And then once it
Yeah.
does happen, then we get that scene, like, where she does go into the water, and there are a lot of scenes like that where I think then the filmmaker is making you aware of her age without having to point it out too much, where it's just like, it's okay. Like whenever
Yeah.
he does mess up, where it's like, no, it's okay. Like where she wants to make him feel better. Or she wants to be like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. And so she just goes along with it. Which I think you're right that it's a great trajectory by the end of the film, that she's like, no, it's not okay. I'm not going along with it. And I will kill I will kill you if you try and make me, actually.
Right. And I think that she does a really good job this movie does a really good job of being on that precipice of being a girl and not a woman yet, you know? There are so many times where, like, I know growing up, just out of college or just, senior year of high school, and you're kind of yeah, you're kind of being like, "Oh, I can flirt. I can make, these decisions, these actions, that are maybe, more, are bigger than my age, are, older than I actually am,
Yeah.
and I pretend to be," and I think that, like, kinda this film captures a lot of, like, that weird in between time where, like, you feel confident enough in your soon to be womanhood, but you're not ready for it. Like, you're not ready to be a woman. You are just a girl. No matter how much, like, Jem would make certain decisions of, like, oh, I am going to pursue him. I am going to get into this relationship. I am going to be a part of this. But a lot of the times it's like, yeah. But then you see, like, oh no, she's kind of almost confused about, like, I'm playing a role of, I'm told that I'm a woman or I'm about to be a woman, right?
Yeah.
I take care of my younger siblings. I am being courted. I like to wed. There's all these different things like the responsibility, she has with her mother, even the relationship she has with her mother, is a lot of times it is peer to peer almost, like her mother expects her to handle the problems of her father as if she was a fully mature adult. Um, and then even like taking care of her father, noticing things that her father is doing. These are all very adult things that are put onto her. But then you see with a lot of other things that she's like, no, she's just a girl, right? Like she cares about dance. she has crushes. She's looking through her, youth pastor, the book that she gets from, like, I think like her summer camp or something
Yeah.
like that. And she's like looking at his picture, Owen's picture as a youth pastor in it. And like, that's a very girlish thing to do, like, to pull up like their picture and like kind of crush on them. Right. And it's like things you do that you just don't do when you're older. Like, even if you do have a crush when you're older, it's like, you're not, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's different. Maybe I am like just am showing how I'm like not with the like social media scene of like maybe like looking them up on social. I don't know if I was that way ever. But yeah, like there's just like girlish things that she does. Even like getting upset when Owen's wife, who is looking over the dance troup's routine because it has to be
Mhm.
approved by one of the women in the community, since they have no like adult dance instructor leader, and now Jem's taken it upon herself to become it, or Owen's told her she could be. Um, and that like the insult that she takes from Owen's wife, kind of being like, no, that move's a little bit too individualistic, or that, and that. She doesn't take like the critique very well. She doesn't like that her performance is getting changed. And I would say that that's a very almost girlish reaction too. Like, yeah, a lot of people will get their feelings hurt if their work is picked apart, but like as an adult, you can kind of manage those emotions, right? And Jem really can't. She immediately goes out and keys
He's the car.
the
Yeah.
wife's car. So, and again, like, yeah, that's just like the recklessness of youth, right? Like the immediate, I can't manage my emotions or my reactions. I go do something stupid. Um,
Yeah.
not that, I mean, the youth pastor's wife, Owen's wife, like, she doesn't deserve any of this, but I can tell you I don't like her. That has nothing to do with like the character. I just think that like we're probably made not to like her because we're kind of in Jem's point of view here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that weird, like, I think that's why like this movie handles like coming of age really well.
Yeah. I think also there's a line in there that she says sometimes, like, and I think it's delivered so well by Eliza Scanlan. Just the way in that scene where she's trying to keep it together and be like, okay, and be respectful, but she's so furious. And it's multi-layered, obviously, because one, like her art is being criticized, but two, this is the wife of the man that she's saying in her
Yeah,
mind that she's
the
in love with.
jealousy,
Yeah,
yeah.
that she is jealous and she just is upset about that too. Uh, but she says like, "Okay, I'll just kneel like the rest of you." Like the way that she says it, like, "I'll just kneel like the rest of you then," because they're all looking up at her. And that's something too that when she goes and she sees Owen that he says that made me laugh though right away. He's like, "Did you key Misty's car?" And then the way she reacts too, which is very almost like she's like, "I'm sorry. I'm really
Yeah,
sorry," like, and then they just kind of push through it. But there were a lot of times in the movie where it then suddenly made me uncomfortable when it was like, "Oh, okay, she's so young." Like, she's so young,
yeah,
and especially seeing, like, when things are falling apart and he is like, "We have to stop," and you see the pain and the way that Eliza Scanlan plays that too, where you see that, like, she really, really believes too, like, in her mind, and that too, I think, is because of that age, that if she was older, she wouldn't think like, "Okay, this is meant to be. This is gonna work out." Um, like, God wants us to be together. That she
yeah.
really thinks that, and she really thinks that he thinks that, and is very genuinely surprised that he's not just gonna go tell everybody, "Oh, we're in love and we're supposed to be together. I'm not supposed to be with my wife." Uh, that she seems really surprised and just genuinely hurt by that because she thought, "Okay, we are on the same page with
You
this."
were
Yeah.
yeah, we're in this together, and and you know what? It doesn't help that, like, yeah, Owen, and I will say this was a very good performance by Lewis Pullman. Like,
Yeah.
I think when he's like trembling, when shit's like hitting the fan, not that I've ever been in that kind of situation. um, but like there's the nervousness of like, oh fuck, like, and you see his anxiety and he's like literally vibrating. Like his performance shows that he's vibrating basically with nerves. But it also just shows like, I don't know, Lewis. Well, not Lewis. Owen. Like, are you full of shit? Because you did tell her, that I think this is God's choice. Basically that I shouldn't be with my wife. This is a sign. This is also another thing that's just like side note. Christianity is always whatever people want it to be. Like it just changes like whenever like, and I do think that was like a subtle undertone kind of throughout the film, is that it was really like whoever decided, each character had their own relationship with religion
Yeah.
and what it meant, where like Jem kind of has this idea that like how could love be bad when like Jesus is love, and kind of like, yeah, I guess it is like a younger ideal of it too, of like, oh, I love him. How could, if I love somebody this much, it must be God, because that's what I've been taught. God is love, right? So like she kind of has a very pure, even childlike way of thinking of her religion. Well, I would argue she is the healthiest view of her religion
Of everyone in the film. Yeah.
out of everyone in the film. Yeah. Uh, so, but yeah. So it's like Owen uses whatever he wants for his, chooses however to look at his version of Christianity that suits him.
Yeah.
Same with the pastor, same with the mother, same with the father, same with Jem. So it's just a funny note there that, I think there is a little bit of like, religion's whatever you want it to be sort of
Yeah,
deal
it
going on.
changes, yeah, throughout the movie, that when it seems like he wants to be justifying to himself and to her, this is okay, because she's the one that says to him too multiple times, like, "You're married." Like, "What about
Mm.
your wife?" Uh, that making himself and her maybe feel better about like, "Okay, but we're not, so we don't even like each other," and us watching it as an adult, we're like, "Okay, so you don't like your
That doesn't
wife?"
mean that
Yeah,
you
that
could
doesn't
just,
mean
yeah, go sleep with like what? Like
with a
arguably
child.
rape a
Yeah.
17-year-old? Yeah, like
Manipulate this, yeah, that it's clear that he has the power, but when he says that in one scene and then later when they're found out, his dad saying like, well, Owen says that, Jem brought him to sin. And then
Yeah.
he during when she has to tell everyone at church, he says that he forgives her too, and then she's so upset after that
Yeah,
too.
that, and he can't even look her in the eye. Yeah,
No,
that's a rough moment where I'm like, that's a punchable. You wanna punch that guy in the
you
face at that
do.
moment.
But he also, like you mentioned before, he feels then very young. Sometimes he feels younger than she is just emotionally in that way where you see like, it's like, oh, it's just another disappointing boy, that can't
Yeah.
say actually how he feels or stand up to his father or speak about how his connection to his faith. And that Jem, yeah, that the way that she is connected to her faith too is she also, I think, through dance, and that's definitely a big part of the movie. Um, that is something that she's continually made to feel bad about. And it's always about like, is it for God? Is it for vanity? Too much focus on the individual. When Misty is critiquing the dance, like, I know you didn't try and draw attention to your legs, but
That was wild. That's like one of those things where it's like, yeah, I did not grow up strict Christian.
no, I felt the
That would be a
frustration with
wild
her. No,
thing
in that
to
scene,
happen.
because every time you could tell that she was going to stop them and be like, okay, but this, and especially something where it's like dance as an art form, like it is your body. It is you drawing attention to certain like
Right.
the movement of your body. So like when she's not able to do that too, I think it's also she knows that like that's wrong. I think a large part of that is like why she starts maybe having thoughts of like maybe this isn't right. You can see her gears kind of turning
Right.
sometimes of like, is this really like I'm not allowed to dance the way that I want to dance, and also that she's made to feel so shameful as if she's doing some kind of as if like they treating her like you can see her bra or she moved her legs slightly while she's dancing, like she's stripping in front of everybody, like it's just any
Right.
little thing. So like that's that level of intensity that maybe not everybody that comes to the film has that. But definitely that feeling of being made to feel ashamed and just bad too about like what you want actually. And you can tell that she really, that's so important to her. She wants to dance.
Mhm.
That even when everything happens to her, terrible things in her life, getting that taken away from her, it seems like sends her kind of over the
Yeah,
edge.
for sure. And then, yeah, you get these full circle details making their way through the film, which I really appreciate is, when she's talking to her dad, you get the details of, oh, he, used to live a quote unquote, sinful life, before individualistic life before he turned to Jesus and the Lord saved him. Um, and he was in a band and he loved music but he only wrote songs about like his struggles and that was the problem, right? And she talks about a bar that he would play at with his band, and we get the detail of like he's kind of turned to drinking again, or not kind of, he does turn to drinking again after one of his friends commits suicide. An old friend, I think it was a bandmate from his past, commits suicide, and that kind of unravels her father. So she's kind of finding out through these drunken conversations with him at night in the
Yeah.
wee hours, like when she's coming back from Owen, um, that he's really struggling with maybe his choice in life, or maybe he just doesn't. We don't know exactly. We don't get a lot, from the father, but clearly he's going over his past and reminiscing and thinking about it, which leads her to question it and learn more about her father. And then she kind of has that connection with her father, this art form that she loves doing, but she can't really do it the way she wants to do it because she's not doing it the right way to praise God. But then we get there's so much to go through. I don't want to go through. I don't want to. I have like the instinct to go chronologically, but I think that's not valuable in this review. So I apologize if I start jumping around a lot. Where she finds her dad's iPod in his jacket that she brings with her when she runs away with Owen for that brief moment, and she listens to one of his songs, which Nicole actually looked up which was smart of her. That's why she's here. The band who did the song that they use that is supposed to be, the father's band, Ace Up My Sleeve song. What's the name of that? The band that they got to do that?
Lord Huron.
Okay. And that song's great. I really enjoyed that
Yeah.
song. She kind of listens to it and it's like, I think it makes her feel obviously connected to dad, but also like it makes her realize that she wants more. And that's kind of what the song is saying too. That like, I don't want to play the cards I've been dealt, I want to play a totally different game that I've been told I can play. And that kind of then triggers her to be like, what am I doing? Like running away with Owen.
Yeah.
And then it leads us to that circle moment of being at the bar that her dad used to play at in Memphis. And then finally getting to dance the way she wants to dance. Like she has the freedom to do the routine that she was doing, that she wanted to do basically, because you see those movements in there. And I thought that was, I really enjoyed the film's ability to lay out these little details and then bring it all together. Like they weren't just put there for no reason. We come back to them.
Yeah. Even that something, I didn't think we were going to return to that. Like when she started driving too, I thought she was going to go home or go see her dad at the hospital or something.
I had that moment. Yeah.
So I really did think that was a great way to end the movie, where she goes to that bar and she remembers from when they talked about it and he is drunk. And I like that about those scenes too, where, he would realize if he wasn't in that way that she's been out, like, where has she been?
Yeah.
Even, like when he has that moment when he says you can't be a dance troupe and he knows that she lied about where she was and he hits her. You can tell when later he apologizes before he ODs that really his anger is probably coming from at himself, because he knows, like, I've not been your dad. Like, I haven't been here. I haven't been watching out. So I don't know where you've been actually. I like that in their relationship, that no matter what was going on, that was the person that she could go to for that art connection. And he has that line in there where he says, if I ask you to give something up, it's so that you have more room for him, that you have more room for God. And I like that too, where it's not like, we don't get that where he sticks up for her or has a turnaround or is like, you don't have to marry Ben. Like, he just kind of goes along with it, but that he feels bad. Like he doesn't feel like right about it. Forcing her into something that she clearly does not want to do. So his character too was just, and I forget what his name, Jimmy Simpson, I think maybe.
Yeah.
He's great too.
That's right. Yeah, though he's from Westworld is what I recognize him from. Yeah, I think that relationship was handled really well. I mean, even like the mother-daughter relationship, I think that this film is a masterclass in character development, or even like just like presenting well-rounded characters without us really needing to know a whole lot about them, And they're not stereotypes, but like it's just the film gives us everything we need to know about the characters in that small amount of time, that she interacts with each. I mean, even the mother, we can kind of get a sense that like she's just trying to hold things together. She's in denial about the father having a drinking problem again. But then we do see moments of, I'm just trying to protect my daughter. There are moments that like, I find the moment really interesting about the mother is when she's sitting with the pastor and Jem's getting reprimanded for this relationship with Owen, which meanwhile, like the pastor will take no responsibility, like we said, for his son's action. Yeah. Like the pastor is saying, Jem's been seduced by the devil and having sinful thoughts that it's causing her to have this relationship with Owen, and Owen was seduced by her sinful lusting after him, right? So he won't take any responsibility for his son's behavior, which is like ridiculous. But we have that one instant where Jem's mother goes, your son, had something to do with it too. I don't know the exact line she says, but she slips into, she slips it in that like Owen was a part of this as well, when all the blame is going to Jem. And I thought that that was a really telling thing, that like maybe there's hope for the mother. Um,
Yeah.
like that she just doesn't always just go along with the community, what they say.
Yeah.
And if you look into it a little bit more, you go, oh well, maybe that makes sense. She did fall for, I mean, maybe he did turn to God before they met, the father and her. But I think that that shows that this family isn't really adhering to the society, or they're not enjoying every aspect of it, or they're not very good at adhering to this. And that even reminds me of the detail of when the sister catches her,
Oh, yeah.
coming out of the window of the bedroom after nearly being caught at Owen's house. She escapes through the bedroom window, and her little sister is there. And I love that moment where like the camera pauses on both of them for a bit of like, what are we going to do here? It was like,
Yeah.
it was like, oh shit, like, are you going to say anything? Like it was both sisters kind of like looking back and forth at each other being like, what are we going to do? Um, like decisions were going to have to be made in those milliseconds, in
Yeah.
those seconds. But I think that even tells you too that the little sister just doesn't automatically go to rat out her big sister. And, maybe a lot
Yeah.
of siblings would do that, but I'm not sure. Like maybe in this kind of community, if she was already fully indoctrinated into this kind of way of thinking, she would immediately rat her sister out.
Yeah.
But I think that's telling of the family dynamic too.
Yeah. I like the detail too, that when she has to tell everybody at church, like, I'm sorry and I'm sinful and stuff. And, he says, does anyone want to come up and offer her forgiveness? Like the sister immediately makes the beeline and hugs her and is like, I forgive you, and you can see in that the actress that plays the sister, Becca, too, does such a great job. Like you can see that when they give shots of her, that it's hard for her to watch her sister be up there and is obviously like so mortified. So as soon as he says that, she just like runs to her right away and is like, I forgive you. But yeah, it seems like everybody, I mean, with the dad too and the mom, like it's the community, it's not serving anybody. That it's with the mom and the dad too, that you can see like they're not able to communicate, I guess, in some kind of way.
Right.
The same way in a different, but similar, how it's like Owen and his wife, and he's like, we've never liked each other,
Yeah.
that they were probably paired up young. But they're not able to talk, really. They're not able to be honest about things. So everybody is just suffering in different ways. And we
Yeah.
don't know what happens after Jem maybe then leaves the bar. But I would like to imagine that maybe eventually, like you're saying, like maybe the whole family realize like this is just not good for us, like we gotta figure
Mhm.
something out. But I love when her mom punched Owen in the face too. That was a great
Yeah, I know that's not a smack. I did.
I'm so
Yeah, when
surprised.
she like just clocks him, that was another like little detail of like, yeah, you could have easily gone to the mother smacks him, right? Like,
Yeah.
right, that would be the normal thing. But she like it's a wind up full on, and she does
Like, get
she
away from
doesn't
her.
react.
Yeah.
She's bloodied him, and she doesn't react in terms of like hurt. She doesn't like shake her fist or anything like that. She just
Yeah.
decks him and like goes after him. And I think that that also just showed a little bit of like the mother understanding that it wasn't Jem.
Yeah.
I think that was her way of being like, this isn't all your fault. Even though she said some really awful mean things to her
Yeah.
daughter to start. But I think there's like underlying things there that we see that the mother's a little bit more empathetic or sympathetic to her daughter than she lets on.
Yeah.
So, and I guess that's another reason why, the film is titled The Starling Girl, right? Like it's not titled Jem. It's not titled Jem Starling. Well, that would be a terrible title if you just used her name. But but I think that it is supposed to kind of when you're using a family's name to associate with like the one bad egg or whatever. And I don't even think it's supposed to show a bad egg. I think that like in general, it just gives the family an outsider status already, you know?
Yeah.
That they're using the family's last name to describe her. Cause I'm not sure if like she was she was being good or being like the ideal whatever they wanted her to be. You'd be using the family's name. I don't know. I'm just going on like a little bit of my brain's kind of moving faster than my thoughts are able to express about like that idea. But I feel like when you're using a family's last name, it's usually like, and you're specifying the one girl, you're already kind of like, oh, you know, the Starling family, you know?
Yeah. I put in my mind, like, you don't want to be like that Starling Girl. It gave me that feeling of gossip.
Yeah.
And just attributing her to her family. Again, too, not a focus on the individual, which comes up again and again in the movie. But her being defined by, yeah, her family, that she's a member of the family. She's one of their girls.
Mm-hmm. So I think brilliant movie. And then I guess to kind of end the discussion on it, I know Nicole touched on it briefly about like, we don't know what she's going to end up doing. Were you surprised that Owen comes back?
Yes,
Like comes to get her?
was.
Like that was a
Yeah.
surprising turn of events for me. I was like, I was not expecting that.
I wasn't
I didn't know
expecting
how
that
she
at
was
all.
going to get out of the camp thing, going to the camp.
No, I didn't expect him to come back. And then after the mom punched him, like, I don't think I expected her necessarily to then jump in the car with him.
Leave with him.
Yeah, and then she's so
Yeah.
excited. But I think that works very beautifully then to transition into when she realizes, like, I don't think I want this either. You know, and she prays again and she's like, just let me be content. You know, like, I just can't even be happy. But you can see, like, she realizes, like, this is just not what I want. But the fact that he does come back, it was very, very surprising.
Yeah, I thought he had totally been like, I got caught. I'm not going to take responsibility for my actions now. And yeah, and I'm going to, you know, pretend like this was never my idea and I never really had anything to do with it. And I'm a golden boy. You know, I really didn't think. Again, I think it makes Owen's character a little bit more sympathetic. You know.
Yeah.
He's not a total monster. He's not like, oh, well, I just got the sex that I wanted from this girl and I have no feelings about what I did.
Yeah. I think
So I do think he works that tightrope.
he does. I mean, I think it's also that he says, you know, that he can't lose her. Like he says, like, you know, like, you're the only one that sees me. That's a big part of it too. Like that genuinely both of them feel stifled in the community and they don't feel like they can be themselves. So that I do believe, like when I'm watching the movie, that he can let his guard down and be himself, but he's also being selfish in that way where he's not thinking about what probably is best for her.
Right. No.
And there's one moment too that really stuck in my head. It speaks to her age, but also it's just like one of those moments where it seems like she's kind of like, okay, I don't want you to then just have me be what you want me to be. You know, where he's like, where you could live anywhere in the whole world. And she's like, I like Kentucky. Like, I like my sisters in the forest.
Right. Yeah.
And he kind of laughs and he's like, you just have no idea what you're talking about. And you can kind of see in her face, you know, that like, you know, but then also we get from his perspective, we're like, yeah, like, well, she's never been anywhere else. You know, like that again, too, where it's like, okay, well, what do you want her to say? Like, she's 17 and you know where she lives. Like, you know, a lot of things, but I agree that I think that it really would have been easy to make Owen full tilt, like just kind of leave that character and he leaves her in the lurch. But he does come back and then he does seem like he's the kind of committed, at least in that moment, to the plan that he's going to sell the car and they're going to go off. And that she doesn't want to do that. And it's another moment again where I feel like it is kind of similar to like we see the same sort of scene in different ways. That it used to be that she sneak out in the middle of the night to go see him. And then I like how she sneaks out to get away from him, that she sneaks away in the middle of the night and gets the keys and leaves him.
Right.
And yeah, that we don't know if after she leaves the bar, if she'll go back to him, go run away with him, if she'll go home, if she goes home, then if she has to go to that camp, what her mother's going to say. Like, but I think that when I do envision it, it's that even if she does eventually end up going back there, that she, through these experiences, has had that moment of realizing, like, I don't think that this is the rest of my life. Like, I don't think this is the way that I
Mm,
want to also practice my faith. Uh, and definitely like ending it in that scene of appreciating, like, I am at this bar where my dad was himself practicing his art. And now I am dancing exactly how I want to with no one telling me how to. That it is like a hopeful, it does leave you in a hopeful
yeah.
place, even though you're like, you still got to deal with all these things. But after that, but that she is just so at peace that you feel genuinely
Yeah.
happy for her.
And yeah, and she's definitely learned something, like she knows she's taken more control of the decisions that she's going to make going forward and what she wants. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Really lovely film. Man, I think it deserves a hell of a lot more talking credit than. I mean, I guess it was a little darling at the festivals, but it's just
Mm.
a shame that not a lot of people have seen this. And it's just been, it's sitting on Netflix. So if you haven't seen it, I know it's ridiculous to say after this, hour-long conversation. And if you're into while listening to just spoilers and then watching a movie, yeah, but I think if you did watch it and you listen to this conversation, I'm hoping that you kind of listener out there had the same kind of feelings about it. And I'd be excited to see this filmmaker, Laurel Parmet, do more. I would love to see more of her. I think she was very efficient in her vision. And I don't know. I don't see that. I don't see that all the time. Where, I'm very, commend her. I'm jealous. I'm envious. I don't know if I could have told that story with that much precision.
Yeah. No, there were just so many times where I was like, I would like pause the movie and be like, oh, that's really smart. That's clever. And I had that thought that you're saying where I'm like, I wouldn't have thought about that. Like that's just such a perfect way. A lot of two visual shorthands that she's able to accomplish to give you the information and make you feel something without having to rely on dialogue and without having to hold your
Yeah.
hand too heavily. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's another thing. There's not a whole lot of, yeah, there is not a whole lot of dialogue. It's not like we're getting like a voiceover monologues. I mean, like with the brief instances that we do, it's Jem praying. Um, but again, that's not like explaining what's going on.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, loved it. And this was a great conversation. I think also that's why I like talking about movies, is because you both realize things, or you're having a conversation. We all realize kind of things that we didn't realize, or we can like explore that more. And also realize that's such a nerdy thing to say. I love having a discourse about a
I love
movie.
talking about films. We do, though. We do.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody so much for listening. If you made it all the way through, I really appreciate it. Obviously, stay tuned for more episodes. I know that we did a bunch of new releases for some of our earlier episodes, but I'm definitely gonna pull up some older films. And this isn't an older film, but I really want to make sure that I showcase these films that might have come out a few years ago or even decades ago that that are available to watch now and that I think are absolutely worth the time. So, thanks again, and we'll see you real soon. Bye.
Bye.